Thanks for taking the time. I know we kind of know you're traveling and everything, so appreciate you
All
taking the
good,
time.
man.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess just get right into it. I guess it's been almost a year now since you retired. I guess just what's that past year been like in terms of making that adjustment to retirement and kind of just dealing with your body and dealing with the pain that you've had.
The transition for me has really been seamless. All the things that I'm active in now, I was doing while I was a player. So, it wasn't like I had to, spend time finding what it was that I'd be spending my time on. One thing that's been interesting though is like it's a year later, and I haven't played any ball, and I really don't feel any better. I had hoped that by, I'd start to recover from some of the things I was dealing with, but really not at that point yet. So I'm still, dealing with injuries, still dealing with headaches from the concussion I had the last year I played. Um, I have, had a lot of personal time, a lot of personal growth, a lot of time with my family, which has been awesome. So, the past year has been good to me in that regard.
Gotcha. Yeah, just in terms of that cause, obviously you're a big advocate for using medical marijuana to treat pain. When did that when did that kind of start? What was the moment? Was there a moment for you when you realized how maybe effective this could be?
The defining moment was really when I was watching a CNN special Weeds, and saw the story of Charlotte, who was almost dying. She was seizing really hundreds of times a day, and started using cannabis oil. Her mom, was heroic and got her access to some oils, and it changed them. It improved the quality of her life, really kept her alive. I saw that, and it was really the first visual for me that really displayed that marijuana isn't really this dangerous drug that we're unfortunately preached to, but it does have great medical application. And before my eyes, I was watching this little girl, recover and stop seizing and actually become a little kid and not a vegetable. It was incredible, and really, this past year showed me it was eye-opening in that regard. I've been to dispensaries and just listened to patients interact with their patient care specialists, and hear the reasons why people are led to use marijuana, and it varies for multiple reasons, and people are finding relief. It's really been life-changing for so many people. So research is one thing, but over the last year I've gotten hands-on experience with it, both personally being able to use it to manage the pain in my joints, and take away some of the stress, and when I have those migraine headaches, marijuana does tend to alleviate those a lot better than any of the pills that I took before too. So it's been really interesting to be able to see it from that perspective, my own experiences now that I can use it and I'm not being tested by the NFL.
When did you see that special? How long ago was that? Can you remember?
I was still playing,
Yeah.
so maybe the tail end of my career. I started to look at all different ways to heal my body. Injuries were piling up, and I had a goal to play 12 years in the NFL, and unfortunately, I didn't make it there. But thinking of it now and knowing what I know, particularly about how the game damages your brain, I'm glad I didn't play that long.
Was that kind of going into the decision, just looking for ways to treat your pain, combining that with seeing that special and realizing that cannabis could be an option for that? Is that kind of just you going through that the finding some solution to deal with the pain that isn't the opioids, the painkillers that they're giving out?
My decision was really made up by a lot of factors. Certainly, managing the injuries was becoming a drag. I was needing outside therapies on a daily basis to be able to perform at a high level. And outside of that, I had concussions during my career, and the last one I had was scary. It took a month for any type of normalcy to return, and I still have headaches from that. So I'd say I actually never recovered from that concussion. So, a lot of things did play. The study that just came out, where we saw that there were 110 out of 111 deceased players' brains displaying CTE. That was jarring, and part of my decision also, had a role to play in looking at some of these studies. That this information was out there. There was even a movie, Concussion, that painted a real picture on just how deadly this disease can be. And you hear about the guys with big names who may have problems in their lives, but there are hundreds, probably thousands of guys that are suffering and might not even know it's related to this disease that they developed over their career.
For you, how does cannabis kind of factor in that? Like, what's the role of that? Is it just kind of a pain management thing, or what's the role there?
So for me, I particularly use cannabis for pain management. That's what I use it for. I can also use it for sleep. It's good to knock you out. There's different formulations that'll help you get rest. There's different formulations that'll help you relieve stress. So the application for cannabis is really wide. It even tends to calm down intestinal inflammation. And I can take some forms of cannabis to help settle my stomach too. So there's different forms of it. You can take it in various ways. And when I think about athletics, the application for it, it's incredible. I mean, I've even talked to guys that are playing right now that are taking cannabis at nighttime to get to sleep so they can recover and be ready for the next day of training camp.
Have you thought about it, any sort, I guess, the kind of the other side of the coin, like the devil's advocate, what the critics would say in terms of, are you worried about addiction, or whether if they loosen up the regulations on that, whether players would get addicted to it, or kind of abuse marijuana?
So, I'm not interested whatsoever in any critics, right? This is a serious issue. This is the life and quality of life, and the condition of the brain for men who play this sport. So, any critic who's concerned about addiction, I would challenge them to educate themselves, and they find that marijuana is far less addictive than any of the prescription medications that these doctors are giving players right now. You have locker rooms where guys are addicted to Vicodin and oxycodone. Guys are addicted to these anti-inflammatory drugs that also knock out pain. Guys are addicted to Ambien to try to get rest at night. So there's addiction that is pervasive, and marijuana can actually remove a lot of those addictions, take away the need for players to take a concoction of pills, and simply heal with much more natural medicine.
Do you think about if you had more access to cannabis and the NFL's rules were less stringent as a player, kind of how your career would have been different, or how other players' careers would have been different?
I did not have a great relationship with drugs while I played in the league. I had a lot of chronic and acute injuries, and I needed anti-inflammatory control to manage that. And I was given pills for it, usually Celebrex, sometimes Indocin. And taking those pills also required me to take pills for all of the GI issues that I got from those pills, and the fatigue and the loss of sleep, and so you're in this environment of, you're just toxic. You're taking all of these pills, and I've been able to replace the need for all of those pills with marijuana, and not just me, people all over our country. And this isn't, furthermore, it's not just me talking. I didn't go and just decide to do this on my own. I've researched this. I've spoken with physicians, actually a group of physicians, doctors for cannabis regulation, who have also tried to reach out to the NFL to sort of further this conversation and get out of this opioid-laden environment.
Yeah, speaking of the NFL, I'm sure you're aware of the reports the NFL reaching out to the NFL Players Association about possibly working on a study to for the effects of marijuana. I guess. What's your reaction to that? Do you think that's a genuine thing they're doing, or think that's a step forward?
I would hope that it's the step forward. I don't know yet if it's genuine. However, it's the first sign that the NFL is actually, willing to be sensible and actually study whether or not there's application for marijuana. Skeptical also because of the timing of this coming when the NFL is under fire publicly because of the CTE study that came out. And cannabis is one of those things that even our government has patented its neuroprotectant properties. So it came at really an opportune time for the NFL as well.
What do you think it takes to kind of get the NFL's attention? Is it people like you kind of coming out and being vocal about this? I mean, do other players have to have more issues with painkillers for them to kind of realize this is an issue, or?
I would hope that we would need any further damage being done by painkillers. It at this point, we need to find a solution for managing pain outside of prescribing pills, and cannabis is one of those things that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that this could be something that's a great benefit to the players. The players themselves have already used cannabis, right? So players have personal experience that they can tell a physician, hey, this works, and it's also not causing all of these other problems. So, I'd be interested to see what this study looks like that they're considering doing, and hopefully both the NFL and NFLPA can come together and move towards more sensible policy.
Yeah, what's your conversation with I guess former players and current players been like? I guess kind of what's the step forward? Is it trying to organize everyone for that cause?
So no, I mean, form active guys are still afraid to talk about
Yeah.
cannabis. Even the ones who call me asking, what types of cannabis they should use. They know it's working for them. They're excelling in training camp because they can sleep at night and they're not in as much pain. So hopefully these conversations with the NFL and the NFLPA will move this forward.
Yeah, and it's actually, you talked about timing. We've actually seen a lot of NFL players, linemen, retiring recently. John Urschel, another Ravens lineman, Ryan Clady, Brandon Albert. Have you reached out to any of them maybe, and kind of what their reasons for retiring, and whether they could be advocates for this cause too?
Everyone retires for different reasons. And I don't know Ryan personally. I have talked to Brandon and John Urschel. Again, this thing really is. We're at the point now where we need the NFL and the NFLPA to talk. I was an active player speaking out about this. There's a ton of former players speaking out about this. There's also another active player, Derek Morgan, who has voiced his opinion on this as well. But furthermore, the NFL just needs to grow up. I mean, they know that players and coaches are consuming cannabis, sometimes together. I seen it when I was in Baltimore. They know it's going on. They know players are using cannabis to heal from pain. They know they're using it to get to sleep. So let's study this. Let's not let our players, do this undercover. Let's find out how we can apply this responsibly.
What do you think their hesitation is in maybe changing the rules?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on things. It could be any reason. What's important is that we recognize here that there's an issue and we move towards a solution.
Do you think there's kind of a public perception issue? I guess with cannabis or marijuana that they're afraid of, that it's stigmatized as a drug that's that shouldn't be associated with the sport.
Again, I can't speculate. The NFL's been all over the place on this issue. You've got Roger Goodell saying there's no medical application. It's not, we're not going to change the policy. And then this week, we're hearing they're considering studying it for medical application. So who knows?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess in terms of the CTE, obviously that's been a hot button issue as well. How have you kind of seen those effects? Is that something that you're concerned with, and you think other NFL players should be concerned with in terms of head injuries and playing for multiple years as you did?
Unfortunately, it looks like it doesn't matter how many years you play in the
Yeah.
NFL. If you're a high school player, there's a chance that you could have this disease. And certainly, it looks like almost every player in the NFL could possibly develop it. You could try to sugarcoat the results and say, well, hey, we thought these guys might have had problems. Well, there's a lot of guys with problems, right? So, even if it's not 100%, if it's 30%, we have a huge problem we need to address.
What do you think is the solution to that, or where do you start with that?
I'm not a physician.
Yeah.
I'm not the one to answer that question. But we need to move fast. We need to get our physicians and the NFL and NFLPA and anyone else really, even if they're not involved in any of these organizations, that could, potentially, crack the code on this thing, so we don't have sports where, we're guaranteeing that our children will one day develop brain disease.
Do you think when you were playing, there's kind of when you're hitting, it's like kind of a focus on hitting with the head. Do you think like there's a technique thing that goes into
No,
that?
there's no technique that can be taught to keep the head out of the game. You see these youth organizations that have come out, and I remember there was one of them. I don't want to misquote this here, but they showed that the only real reduction in injury came when they reduced time on the field, when there was less hitting. They try to teach techniques where you keep your head out of it. That sounds nice. However, it doesn't work, particularly up front in the trenches where the heads are banging every single play. You just cannot avoid contact in the game. You also have the fact that there's nothing you can put on top of your head. There's no helmet that they can make that will effectively eliminate concussions, eliminate the shearing of the neurons when your head's colliding with another player. So there's some real issues here.
Yeah. What do you think that means? Kind of, not to get too broad, but like for the future of the sport, like should our children be playing and like risking head injury? Is there a way to go forward safely?
People make arguments, and look, football is a game that is part of our culture. It owns a day of the week for half of the year. So really, this is a loaded issue. People make the comparison that, we know it's a violent and brutal game. However, so is boxing and so is MMA, and we enjoy that. But, those are not sports where, children are getting involved. It's not, integrated into our school systems. So this is a big deal here. And, football is, from my perspective, under a state of emergency. Um, Players are in denial. Coaches are in denial. Um, if you're in the game, you're playing or you're involved, you're sort of invincible and immune to those dangers. However, they're very real. And the smartest man in the game realized that and retired because of it. That's saying something.
Yeah, I know a lot of players have come out, and I guess their stance on it is that the game has been so good to them, they wouldn't be where they are without the game. They kind of can't quit it, so to speak. Where do you come down on that in terms of just guys who have this desire to play no matter what, and they'll deal with the consequences later?
Love is a powerful thing, and we love this game. It will blind you, and it will make you, go against the truth, even in this case. So for those players who, are so hell bent on continuing and compete, knowing that they're putting themselves at risk, well then, they've made that choice. I hope that more guys do understand, that the long-term health of their brain is far more important than that money they're earning. Because in 15 years, if you're losing your ability to speak, how are you going to spend that money? Probably on therapies to keep, your brain functioning.
Yeah, if you had known what you know now, would that have changed maybe whether you would have played or how long you would have played?
I can't make that statement, because I did play, and I'm sitting here, after the fact. So who knows what choices I would have made? Um, Fortunately, well, not fortunately, it doesn't matter. But growing up, football wasn't the first thing that came to mind, and for me, some of these players, don't have an identity outside of the game, and those are probably the guys who are in denial about the dangers of CTE.
Yeah.
So again, this thing is real. I've spent time with a player who is just 2 years older than me. I played against him when I was a Jaguar, and it was scary. His kids don't want to play football because they see the pain, not just the physical pain that their father is in, but it hurts them when their father can't remember their name or tumbles down the stairs because he's passed out with a concussion. That's very real, and I see that, and I'm not in denial.
Yeah, I kind of wrapping up here. How do you deal with that pain, especially now that you're kind of removed from the NFL locker room, removed from the having the training staff there? How do you deal with that, and deal with that going forward for the rest of your life?
So the regimen, it's up to me.
Yeah.
I've been extremely proactive in managing the injuries that I've had, doing a lot of the things, that I was required to do to maintain performance on the field. Unfortunately, just to maintain normal life, I've got to continue to do those things. And while I played, I was extremely disciplined. I'd be hard pressed to find a player who, looked to take care of themselves to the degree I did. So, I'm going to continue that because, I know I have to. If you look at the Super Bowl and watch the retired guys walk up, that's in my future if I don't take care of myself.
Yeah, I guess one more question in terms of cannabis use in the NFL and kind of the future, like a year or two from now. What do you hope to see, or what are you kind of hoping for?
you know, I'm not hoping for anything a year or two out, right? We're here starting another season where the climate hasn't changed. So, I'm going to continue to press and do what I can so we can create a healthier sport.
All right.
All
Well, yeah.
right.
Thanks again, and best of luck. Best of luck going forward.
Appreciate it, man. Take care.
All right.